A barren, rocky hill rose amid the Sierra Nevada range in California. The cold moonlight poured down, stretching the shadows of the trees into ghostly sentinels. SEAL Team Delta 9 was trapped. Sporadic gunfire echoed through the night, blending with the wind whistling through the ravines. They had sent out SOS signals multiple times, but the only answer was silence. Deadly silence. Then suddenly, a calm, cold female voice cut through the radio. "Delta 9, I have your coordinates. Hold your position." The entire team froze. Someone whispered, "Is it her?" In that instant, fear and hope intertwined. For in the military, there had long been a rumor of a ghostly female sniper who had saved the lives of many special operations units, then vanished from the records as if she had never existed. The moon hung suspended over the Sierra Nevada sky, glaring down like a silver eye upon the endless cliffs. The night here was skin-cutting cold, with the wind crawling through the mountain passes, raising howls that sounded like the laments of lost souls. On a barren hillside, SEAL Team Delta 9 clung to every rock, every breath, like lone warriors on a deadly chessboard. Their helicopter had gone down less than a day earlier, its engines silent, leaving only black smoke curling into the sky. What was supposed to be a simulation exercise had turned into a fight for survival. They had thought they would only face a few staged scenarios, but the sudden appearance of a heavily armed group of mercenaries had turned everything into hell. Delta 9 were no longer soldiers in training, they were living targets being hunted. Lieutenant Ethan Walker pressed his back against a cold boulder. He tried to scan the terrain through the infrared scope, but the fog was too dense, so dense it swallowed even artificial light. Before him stretched nothing but a blank canvas of white, and the only reminder of life was the dry, metallic weight of his rifle stock in hand. Each passing minute felt like a negotiation with death. Across from him, Corporal Luis Ramirez panted, his broad shoulders trembling faintly with exhaustion. He had always been the team's optimist, cracking jokes even during night marches. But now, in the icy fog and distant gunfire, his rare smile had vanished. Ramirez tried whispering something to reassure Brooks, the 1-year-old rookie whose youthful face was already etched with fear. Brooks forced a smile, but the chatter of his teeth turned it into something awkward, fragile. In another corner, Sergeant Cole Harris gripped his rifle tightly, eyes unwavering. He was the type who rarely spoke, his calm demeanor often bordering on unnerving. Yet even Harris, the man who had endured the firestorms of Fallujah, had to admit this situation was beyond any training scenario. He glanced at Walker, his look saying all that needed to be said. "We're out of options, sir." Delta 9 had held out for 3 days in these mountains. They had moved constantly, searching for cover, firing back only when forced. Their rations were down to a few packs, water rationed into gulps. Ammunition was dwindling, each bullet spent with the weight of a life-or-death decision. The cold pierced every layer of fabric, making even the pull of a trigger a struggle. Walker drew in a long breath. He knew the truth. No air support, no quick reaction force, and their retreat routes compromised. They were facing an enemy larger, better armed, and infinitely patient. In 14 years of special operations, Walker had seen many desperate situations, but this time felt different. It was as though they were slowly walking into a trap with no exit. The wind howled harder, carrying him back to memories of his Texas home nights on the porch, listening to his father read scripture. As a boy, he had thought those prayers were nothing more than the habits of old men. But now, in these frozen mountains, they resurfaced in his mind, like a small lifeline bobbing on a fog-choked sea. A thunderous gunshot from the ridge snapped him back. Muzzle flashes sparked, rounds whistled overhead, striking the rocks and scattering sparks. Brooks hunched down, clutching his helmet. Ramirez muttered a curse under his breath, while Harris squeezed his trigger in response. Desperation thickened in the air. No reinforcements, No answer to their SOS. Each heartbeat thudded like a death drum. And in that moment, a fleeting thought crossed Walker's mind. Was this the end of Delta 9? But sometimes, when darkness devours hope, a single spark can change everything. Could a stranger's voice rekindle the light for men standing at the edge of death? All right, before you settle in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you truly resonate with what I'm sharing. And leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from around the world. The radio crackled to life unexpectedly, not with the familiar static hiss, but with a calm, steady female voice so clear it made Delta 9 feel as though someone were standing right beside them. Even as bullets hissed overhead, the voice came through, composed and unwavering. Delta 9, you have hostiles at bearing 060, range approximately 420 meters, concealed behind the rock crevice. Another group is advancing from the west. Time remaining, less than 5 minutes. The entire team froze. Ethan Walker lifted his head from behind the boulder, eyes wide. He knew this terrain well, a labyrinth of jagged rock, visibility strangled by suffocating fog. Even with infrared optics, they couldn't pinpoint enemy positions. And yet this woman's voice described them with precision, as if she were perched above, surveying the entire battlefield. For a moment, silence fell, too heavy to break. Then Ramirez muttered under his breath, soft enough to be carried off by the wind, yet clear enough for Walker to catch. Could it be her? Her. Just 2 words, but enough for everyone to understand who he meant. At Fort Bragg, where America's elite soldiers are forged, stories had long circulated in the dark of the training grounds. Tales of a phantom shaped like a woman. A sniper who never missed. She was known by many names: Spectre, Phantom, Angel, or simply the vanished female sniper. Walker had always dismissed them as campfire ghost stories meant to boost morale. But here, in the freezing Sierra Nevada night, with that voice echoing across the radio, he was forced to wonder, could legend bleed into reality? Harris scowled, deliberately shaking off the thought. For him, anything outside battlefield truth was a distraction. Yet even the man hardened by the firestorms of Fallujah couldn't hide the flicker in his gaze. Perhaps, deep down, some small part of him wanted to believe there was indeed an unseen hand shielding them. Brooks, the youngest of the squad, couldn't conceal his trembling. His face lit up for just a moment like a child hearing of superheroes for the first time. But that glow quickly retreated, smothered by the fact that real bullets were still screaming across their heads. The woman's voice came again, sharper now, decisive, cutting like a command. Move. Now. If you don't, you'll be crossfired in 4 minutes. Walker swallowed hard. This was not the voice of someone guessing, it was the voice of someone who had seen the whole board. He knew the tone of senior commanders well, but this voice carried something else entirely. The cold certainty of someone who had walked the edge between life and death many times before. In his mind, fleeting memories resurfaced briefings back at Bagram, when comrades whispered of a female sniper who had once taken down a target over 2,000 meters away under near-impossible conditions. She had saved an entire platoon from an ambush, and then vanished. Records erased, her name gone. All that remained were fragments of stories, embroidered through generations of soldiers. Even in exhaustion, Ramirez managed a bitter smile. He muttered, "If it really is her, at least we'll have one hell of a bar story when we get back." A small joke, but enough to briefly lift the crushing air. Walker recognized it instantly. This was how soldiers clung to hope, even when it seemed as fragile as smoke. The name Spectre began to take shape in all 4 minds. They'd heard veterans claim she was the kind of person who refused failure, that every bullet she fired carried purpose, that she appeared in places no one expected, then slipped away as though she had never existed. Perhaps it was all fabrication, But in this moment, even a legend was something worth holding on to. And if she truly was out there, then Delta 9's survival through the night was no longer an impossible dream. Walker pressed his back deeper into the stone, his eyes narrowing. He didn't believe in miracles, but he did believe in the difference one human being could make. If that voice truly belonged to Spectre, then they had just been given a second chance. The only question left hanging in his mind: did they have the courage to seize it? When the mysterious voice came through the radio for the third time, the air between the canyon walls seemed to freeze. Fog hung thick, swirling like a living creature wrapping itself around everything. For Delta 9, every passing second felt like a blade suspended overhead, ready to fall at any moment. But then, that voice's arrival transformed the suffocating silence of death into something else entirely, a strange rhythm, both chilling and hopeful. The nameless woman gave them no time to hesitate. Her voice flowed steadily, as though she were reading from an invisible map. Ramirez, northeast, 20 meters, by the horseshoe-shaped rock. Walker, lay down suppressive fire. Move now. Walker had never been the type of officer to put blind trust in a stranger. But here, refusal meant death. He signaled, and Ramirez bolted. Gunfire cracked viciously, spraying down the slope. In that instant, a sharp report rang out from the distance. The enemy muzzle flash atop the ridge suddenly winked out. Ramirez dove into new cover, shouting a short burst half-report, half-release of tension. And Brooks, though his heart hammered like a war drum, couldn't stop himself from blurting out, "God, who could shoot that clean in this fog?" Walker knew the answer was already haunting all of them. If this truly was Spectre, then every shot wasn't just precise, it was placed like a chess move on a brutal board. The radio crackled again, clipped and cold. "Harris, 30 meters south, fallen log. Brooks, move after him. Walker, keep suppressing." Harris was never one to hesitate. He rose, sprinting toward the designated spot. Bullets hissed over his head, rock shards exploding underfoot, but he slid into position just as another shot ripped the night apart. The enemy behind the boulder went silent permanently. Brooks gaped at the sight. He couldn't decide whether to feel terror or safety. Part of the young soldier wanted to believe it was some kind of trick, while another part whispered that perhaps they truly were under a phantom's protection. And so, the movement began to resemble a strange dance. They ran, crawled, stumbled, then fired back. Each time they broke cover, another shot rang out from afar, dropping the threat exactly when needed. Walker began to sense the rhythm. This mysterious woman wasn't just aiding them. She was conducting them like a maestro, turning chaos into a deadly symphony. She chose her targets to carve out safe corridors, removing with surgical precision the very enemies that could have blocked their advance. Even Ramirez, taut with strain, couldn't resist squeezing in a joke. Reloading his magazine, he muttered with a dry laugh, "If we make it out alive, I swear I'll buy her a whole case of tequila. Not that I'd know where to send it." Brooks snorted a laugh, small but precious. In the storm of bullets, even clumsy humor reminded them they were still human, not just machines grinding through carnage. Step by step, they pressed forward, each pace paid for in sweat, blood, and phantom gunfire, until Walker began to realize this wasn't chance anymore. This was art. Every shot fired by Spectre carried two effects. One, elimination of a target. Two, the sowing of fear. The enemy began to hesitate, move erratically, lose confidence. They couldn't locate the invisible sniper, only watch comrades collapse one by one. From being cornered prey, Delta 9 was clawing back the initiative. Walker felt it viscerally, as though they were being hauled back from the cliff's edge onto solid ground. Through his scope, Harris shook his head faintly. He had served with outstanding snipers before, but none reached this level. This wasn't simply marksmanship. This was tactical calculation beyond reason, as if she could see minutes into the future. After nearly an hour of relentless pressure, they had covered half a mile, entering a narrower valley where piled rock could form a defensive line. The enemy was still numerous, but their disarray was undeniable. Infrared flashes darted erratically, shouted orders grew sharp and frantic, control unraveling. Thanks to that unseen guidance, Delta 9 had escaped the original kill zone. They were still wounded, exhausted, and running low on ammo, but for the first time in days they felt it. A chance. In the darkness, Walker gripped his rifle tight, eyes fixed on the ridge where those impossible shots had come from. He wondered, who was she? Truly? A ghost? A legend? Or simply a soldier who refused to abandon her own? One thing was certain. She had turned a death-trap battlefield into a dance macabre, and in that deadly music, Delta 9 was learning to follow her lead. Dear listeners, take a sip of water and stay tuned for what comes next, because the surprises aren't over. Comment 1 if you're enjoying the story, so we know you're still with us. The Sierra Nevada night had changed. Just a few hours earlier, Delta 9 had been trapped in an invisible snare, every breath carrying the stench of death. And yet now, thanks to that hidden hand, they had carved a way out through the suffocating fog. But the journey was far from over. Life was no gift, it was a fragile thread that any mistake could sever. Spectre still held the role of conductor. Her voice came steady, like a compass in the dark. She issued short commands, never wasting a word. Each directive brought Delta 9 closer to a natural stone wall, a place strong enough to be a fortress. That was where she promised to lead them, the only ground sturdy enough to keep them alive until sunrise, or until reinforcements arrived. Walker felt every step like moving through a dream. He knew they were still in danger, but for the first time in days, despair no longer pressed down on his shoulders. Instead came the feeling of being guided, protected by an invisible hand. Ramirez, true to form, couldn't resist joking, even here. He whispered, "If she really is a ghost, I hope all ghosts are this charming." Brooks chuckled, the sound bursting out and making the whole team feel lighter. In war, even a scrap of humor could be a priceless medicine. Harris was different. He stayed silent, observing, noting how the enemy's formation had shifted. Their rhythm was broken. Spectre's bullets hadn't just thinned their numbers, they had shattered their spirit. He saw them faltering, moving erratically, their confidence gone. A force that had once been overwhelming, fully armed, was now cautious of 4 exhausted men. The path to the stone wall was no easy march. They had to crawl across loose scree, roll among jagged boulders, slide through narrow crevices that tore at their skin. Walker led, every muscle stretched to the limit. Their magazines were nearly empty, each shot weighed as though it were the last. Yet Spectre was always a step ahead. Every time they prepared to move, she had already cleared the way with impossible precision fire. When the stone wall finally loomed into view, they nearly collapsed from fatigue. But it was what they needed, a natural citadel, tall and unyielding, strong enough to build a defensive line. They pressed their backs against it, lungs heaving. The enemy was still out there, but their fire slackened. Shouts echoed in the fog, muddled with the sound of hurried footsteps. A final few shots cracked out from Spectre, and then silence. For the first time in days, silence no longer meant death. It was the silence of enemies retreating, of a battlefield gone still. Walker slowly pressed the radio button. He wasn't sure what to say, but gratitude swelled until it choked him. At last he managed. "We owe you our lives." Spectre's voice answered, calm as ever, but heavier now, weighted. "You owe me nothing. Go home, to your families." Then the radio faded, leaving only emptiness. Delta 9 looked at each other. No one spoke. Ramirez let out a sigh, for once without a joke. Brooks slumped, eyes red but a faint smile lingering on his young face. Harris quietly checked his magazine, as though keeping himself busy to avoid confronting the storm of emotions inside. At dawn, when the rescue helicopter landed on the clearing near the stone wall, its rotor wash blew away the last shreds of fog. Delta 9 climbed aboard in silence, carrying wounds in both body and soul. But each of them knew they had just witnessed something few would ever believe, no matter how many times they told it. As the chopper prepared for liftoff, Harris spotted something on the ground, just steps from their nighttime defense line. He bent down, brushed off the dust. It was a silver patch, etched with the image of a black falcon in flight. No unit number, no name, but all of them understood. This was the mark of a ghost. Harris handed it to Walker. The lieutenant turned it in his hand, tracing the worn lines. It wasn't new. It had been carried for years, through battles never written in any official record. Walker gave a slow nod and tucked the patch into his pocket. He knew this wasn't just a keepsake. It was proof. Proof that last night hadn't been a hallucination. Spectre had been there, saved them, then faded into the dark as if she had never existed. One question lingered in all their minds. Would they ever see that ghost again? Or was this the only time in their lives? Back at the Coronado base, the California sun blazed across the sky, but it could not erase the echoes of that Sierra Nevada night. Delta 9 had been saved, but none of them felt it was the end. On the contrary, the silence that lingered from that voice on the radio was like a door left ajar, hinting at a world more mysterious than they had ever known. In the days that followed, Ethan Walker could not stop thinking about the silver patch engraved with the black falcon. It sat in his hand like undeniable proof that the ghost was real. But her name, her identity, the reason she appeared and vanished, all of it remained an enigma. He began searching. At first it was just fragments of stories from old comrades at Bagram. Then, vague, encrypted emails, interrupted phone calls. Each clue felt like a broken shard of some larger mosaic. And at the center of that mosaic, one name kept surfacing: Clara Hayes. They said Clara had once been one of the finest female snipers in the military. In 2012, she was deployed in Helmand, Afghanistan. During an ambush, Clara eliminated 7 targets at over 1,800 meters within minutes, saving an entire platoon. From then, her reputation spread across forward bases. But just 3 years later, she vanished from all official records. No discharge papers, no KIA reports, just a void leaving soldiers with a haunting question. What happened to Clara Hayes? Ramirez, ever the joker, once quipped, maybe she got tired of the battlefield and opened a coffee shop in Montana. But even he knew it wasn't that simple. Walker dug deeper, and the trail grew clearer. An anonymous foundation, set up in Denver, had poured millions into PTSD support programs for veterans. Another group in Montana had bought land to build a recovery center exclusively for returning special forces. And buried in an overlooked report was mention of a nameless private security firm with a mission success rate so high it defied belief. The common thread: no one knew who was behind it. But for Walker, the pieces fit. Clara Hayes had not died, nor disappeared. She had simply chosen another path, a silent one. Without medals, without glory, yet carrying a weight far greater. It reminded him of her words over the radio: "Go home. To your families." That was not the order of a cold officer. It was the message of someone who had seen the true cost of war. Brooks, the youngest, still bore scars from that night. But within the fear, he found something else: hope. He began to believe that even in the darkest of nights, there were people who refused to abandon their comrades, and that belief reshaped the way he saw the world. Harris, as always, remained silent. He had never been one to speak much, but the look in his eyes as he stared at the black falcon patch said everything: respect and recognition for a legend he had thought was nothing but rumor. Ramirez returned with his trademark sarcasm. telling the tale with a smirk. Yet deep inside, he knew they had escaped death not only through their own skills, but because of a nameless guardian angel. And sometimes, even the clowns needed something to believe in to keep their hearts from turning to stone. Weeks later, Walker received new information. That anonymous foundation had just established a scholarship in the names of 3 soldiers who died during Operation Thunder Silence in 2018. The press called it the noble act of a nameless benefactor. But for Walker, it was a bitter reminder. That very operation was what had driven Clara Hayes out of the military. They said the loss of those 3 lives left scars in her that would never heal. And instead of walking away, she chose to continue protecting, but in ways no one expected. Delta 9 began to realize Clara Hayes was not merely a marksman of impossible skill. She was a woman who carried loss, but turned it into strength to shield others. A ghost not because she was unseen, but because she chose to live outside the light of recognition. One quiet evening in Coronado, Walker sat alone in the command office, the black falcon patch resting on the table. He thought, perhaps history would never record the name Clara Hayes. But in the hearts of those she had saved, she would live forever. The only question that haunted him was this: would Clara ever step out of the shadows one day, or would she remain an eternal, nameless legend? News of Delta 9 spread quickly, but the official report contained only a single line: assisted by unidentified Allied forces. On paper, that was all. No mention of the shots cutting through the fog, no mention of the calm female voice over the radio, and no place to record the silver patch engraved with the black falcon. But for those who survived, they knew they had lived through a night that would follow them for the rest of their lives. Walker placed the patch in a small wooden frame in the command office. It wasn't decoration. It was like a mirror, so that every day, when he looked at it, he remembered that in the darkest hours, someone had chosen to stand up. He kept the habit of sitting quietly before it each evening, sipping a strong coffee, letting the memories of that Sierra Nevada night wash over him. Ramirez told the story everywhere, with his half-joking, half-serious tone. At the bar, he would raise a glass, squint, and say, "You know, we were once saved by a ghost. And I swear I'll buy her tequila if I ever see her again." The listeners laughed, some shook their heads, claiming he was exaggerating. But behind the laughter, everyone noticed the look in Ramirez's eyes, a look too real to dismiss. Brooks, the young soldier, turned that experience into fuel. He pushed harder in training, endured extra miles of running, extra hours at the range. Because he believed that if a ghost could achieve the impossible, then he, still among the living, had no reason to give up. Harris grew even more silent. But whenever someone mentioned the name Clara Hayes, his eyes lit up with respect. Perhaps in his heart, there already stood a monument not of bronze, not of stone, but of memory that would never fade. Then one day, Delta 9 received a small package delivered to the barracks. Inside, no return address. Just a handwritten note. Heroism is not recognition. It is doing what must be done when no one else can. You have proven that. Along with the note was a thick envelope containing documents about a new veterans center in Montana. Modern renderings, bright therapy rooms, family spaces. On the last page, scrolled in rough handwriting, "Do not forget those still fighting in silence." Walker stared at the handwriting. He knew it was a rare trace from Clara Hayes. She didn't need them to know where she was, nor did she need their thanks. Instead, she gave them a message to keep fighting, not only on the battlefield but in everyday life. In the months that followed, Delta 9 carried out more missions, each one completed. But in each man's heart, they always carried the story of Spectre. It became an invisible thread that made them stronger, more resilient. One night, Walker sent an email to an address that barely seemed to exist. The message was simple. Message received and understood. Delta 9 will continue the mission. Thank you for reminding us of the true meaning of service. He did not expect a reply. But 3 days later, a short line appeared in the secure inbox. Stay safe. No signature, no details, but each word was like a distant handshake, enough for Walker to understand that the ghost was still out there, still watching. Delta 9 grew stronger. They learned to turn fear into drive, memory into strength. And during training, whenever a new recruit asked about the falcon patch hanging on the wall, Walker would simply smile. It's a keepsake from an old friend. Someone you may never meet, but someone you'll always wish to be like. The story of Spectre spread not officially, not written in books, but through whispers and late-night retellings. It gradually became a new legend within the special operations community that there was a woman, a ghost, who chose to walk outside the light in order to protect others. That legend was never carved into statues, nor was her name inscribed in records of valor. But sometimes, a legacy doesn't lie in what is left on paper, but in how one person changes others. And Clara Hayes had done exactly that. When night fell, Walker often asked himself, how many soldiers out there had been saved by her without ever seeing her face? How many families remained whole because of bullets fired from a place no one could see? And would there come a day, when Clara was no longer there, that someone else would continue her legacy? That question had no answer. But for Delta 9, they understood that sometimes guardian angels do not need glory nor recognition. They only need one night, one shot, one message. And that alone is enough to forever change the lives of those who remain. Perhaps, in the fog-covered mountains of America, the echo of a ghost's gunfire still lingers. And maybe, on another night, another team will once again hear that calm female voice cutting through the deadly silence. Hold your position. I'm here. There are battles that will never be recorded in history books, and there are heroes who will forever walk in the shadows. But what we remember most is not the number of bullets fired, but the choice one person makes when faced with danger, to stand when no one else can. The story of Spectre reminds us that sometimes the greatest strength is not found in fame or medals, but in compassion and silent sacrifice. For the veterans who have returned, and for those who carry unseen wounds, this story is like a comfort. You are not alone. There are guardian angels still watching over you in one way or another. And for each of us, the greatest legacy we can leave behind is not our name, but the good we leave imprinted on the lives of others. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. If you believe that there is always light within the darkness, leave a comment and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so that more people can feel the message of courage and humanity.